Welcome to Melanin Convos, a sisterhood of mom friends having relatable and unorthodox conversations while holding space for each other and amplifying Black voices. Welcome to Melanin Convos. I'm your host, Nikita Bucknor, and today I have Titilope with me. She was the Poet Laureate last year, and I'm really excited to interview her and to just have a conversation about betting on yourself, leaving your 9-to-5, and really just engulfing yourself into your passions and whatever that may mean for you. So hi, Titilope.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. Just by getting to know you through Instagram. I'm just like, oh my goodness, I have to have her. So I'm really excited about this. But before we dive in, I just want to do a mom moment where I ask you a question and then we'll just share an embarrassing moment. Yeah, something that our kid did to embarrass us, okay? So yeah, tell me a time that your child embarrassed you.
I feel like
made you feel
in this situation, I'm the one who embarrassed my child.
Okay, sure.
But my son started daycare quite late. Most kids, their moms go back to work around 1 year, and so they're starting then. But I work from home, and so I kept him.
Okay.
He didn't start daycare until he was 19 months or something. He was
Nice.
a bigger kid.
Yeah.
But he was also my first, and leaving him with anyone but my mom was something that was very foreign to me. So I remember he started daycare that day. I dropped him off. He cried. I cried. We did the whole thing. And his daycare is one of those that sends you reports and pictures. And I remember driving home, and I got home and I remember refreshing the app. It's been 10 minutes. Where's my child? Do you know that I got back in my car and drove back to the daycare to go stand at the window and just look at him? And I know that if he had seen me, he probably would have cried some more. But I think in retrospect, he probably would have been more embarrassed of me than the other way around. But I think it took me a very long time to be able to separate myself from my child, especially the first one. And so I'm sure lots of moments like that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Similar daycare story, but I know one time we were having such a hard time getting ready, to leave the house. And I said to my son, I was like, okay, if you don't get ready, daddy's not gonna be able to do X, Y, and Z. So then I get to daycare, I'm like, oh, my son is so excited for dad. And he's like, no, you said.
Exactly.
And I was like, oh my gosh, kid. Why couldn't you just keep it?
No, they can't.
No,
they can't pretend.
That's why we have to be careful what we say. So they don't embarrass us. Anyways, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, so like I mentioned, you were the Poet Laureate last year. Can you share what that title is? What did you do?
Sure. The official brief is that I am the official storyteller of our city. My work that I create in that time, poems that I write, are supposed to reflect city life and tell the story of the people of Edmonton in all their very diverse ways of being. It also means that you get invited to official city council meetings sometimes to share a poem, or anytime there's a moment that needs to be uplifted or commemorated in some way is a good time that as a poet laureate we called upon to kind of capture that particular moment in time. You also have a poet laureate project that you do. You also are expected to be in community. You want people in the city to want to know what poetry is all about. And so doing as many city community events as possible, doing workshops, appearing in schools. You basically become the city's town crier, But it was an honor really and a real privilege to serve in that role.
And you did that for 2 years, right?
For 2 years, yeah.
Nice. Do you have to apply? Was it a competition? Yeah. Okay.
You apply, you submit your resume and why you think you should be in this role. You submit it, hundreds of people submit, and then they narrow it down. They put together a panel of experts or your peers, I guess, who are in the community, and they decide and do a shortlist. That shortlist gets interviewed, and it's pre-COVID, it's a face-to-face thing where you're asked to perform a poem, and they ask you several questions about why you want to be in this role. But my term happened in 2021. We were still in COVID thing, so it was virtual over Zoom. It's just squares of faces. And each person asks you a question. Some can be difficult questions, some are, comments even, and then they ask you to share a poem and you perform, and then they just say bye-bye. And then you wait, and eventually, this is, I think, the cool part, is that the way in which you know that you got the role is that you get a call from the mayor.
Oh.
And at that point, you're the mayor's only calling me to tell me one thing.
Right.
Hopefully not calling me to tell me sorry. But yeah, so at the time, the mayor was Mayor Don Madison, and so he called and said, "Hello, it's."
That's actually
You know,
really
and I'm
cool.
like, and so he tells you, this is the role that you're serving in, and looking forward to working with you.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. Was it like, I mean, never mind. I was gonna say, was it a private number? Like, how do you know it's
I
the
do
main?
not have his number. It is a private number.
Okay. But that's really cool. I really like that. So who or what inspired you to do poetry? Like, I've seen some clips of like your performances, and every time like I'm like, oh, this is giving me really neo soul, flowetry type of vibes. So who kind of like inspired you to even start?
That's pretty spot on. I think my influences, because typically when people ask me this question, they want me to say other poets, and I feel like I have such a range of influences that I have always loved storytelling and writing.
Okay.
Even as a child, I would just write nonsensical things. But I think that when I started to fall in love with spoken word poetry, the influences that I had then were like the Def Poetry Jam poets. I found Def Poetry and I was like, jumped right into it. I loved Lauryn Hill growing up, and I just loved her whole essence. And she to me is a poet as well. Her work is steeped in like what I consider to be poetic traditions.
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of music while I'm writing, and I think I lean toward things that have depth. So I'm inspired really by other artists who tell stories. Sometimes even when I'm listening to a song, I'm listening for like the poem in the song.
Right.
And so I think all of those things reflect in the work that I write.
Yeah, that's fair. I think similar to you as a dancer, I think that is also what I listen for, like how they're telling the story and how to depict the story through like obviously my body. But yeah, no, I love that. Okay, so while I was thinking about this episode, I'm like, what if we did like a freestyle?
Oh my
like,
God. Okay.
I'm like, what if we did something spontaneous? Like just
Sure.
throw words together or something
Okay.
about very Black motherhood, amplifying voices. We were
Are you
talking
doing
about
this
things.
freestyle or
No,
am I doing
you're
this
doing this
freestyle?
freestyle.
Okay. It's so funny because in workshop situations, sometimes I make people do things like this. I don't think I've ever had to myself. But yes, please continue. Let me
Okay,
see.
so yeah, Black
Reading.
motherhood, amplifying voices. Let's think about, you talked about like having to leave your son for the first time. So let's talk about that. And maybe even being an immigrant to Canada, maybe-ish. I don't know, it's a lot of things. There's a lot. But
Okay.
let's see where we can. Okay, go
So
with that.
you just want me to go?
Yeah.
Are you gonna do one too?
No.
It's just me? Okay.
Don't want to beatbox.
No. Please no. I need to think. Wait. Okay.
Okay.
I came of age in this city. I was birthed in the streets of Edmonton, so that when my child was born, he had the essence of the city inside of him. He showed me how to be more me. He showed me that my voice mattered. I think that's all.
Okay. I love where you're
This
going
is
with
very,
it.
very difficult to do.
I
With
know.
no pen. I'm not Jay-Z, you know that, right?
I
You know
know.
he like writes all his rhymes in his head. I think I'd have to think about it some more.
It's okay.
Mhm.
I'm just happy with what you came up. I'm like, let me just see how this would play out if we try to do a freestyle. Anyways,
Lord, my reputation is at stake.
no, everyone, we love you. Okay, so so we know that you're the poet laureate. What were you doing before that? Or you were the poet laureate. What were you doing before?
I was poeting around town. It's funny, in my poet laureate interview, they asked me what I would be doing next, and I just said more of what I've been doing.
Right.
Before that, I was doing poetry full time. Before that, I was an engineer. So
Okay.
if we're gonna reach far
Yeah.
back. So my educational background is in engineering. I was building roads and bridges across the city. I eventually realized that I was wasting time, to cut the long story short,
Right.
and that I just needed to attempt, do it or don't. I was
Right,
at
yeah.
that point where I was gonna try or just let it go. So before that, I was just kind of building, I would say. I started a poetry platform here in Edmonton called Breath and Poetry. We had a weekly open mic night downtown Edmonton
Nice.
for a decade, 10 years. And every Tuesday night we were downtown performing, slamming. Slam is like a competitive style of poetry.
Okay.
So I was doing that kind of community building work, and also teaching workshops at schools, traveling for poetry. The more I did it, the more invitations I got.
Of course,
to do things, obviously. But I was just being an artist, you know. I was trying to find. There's no blueprint for this work.
Right.
I didn't know many professional poets who weren't, you know, teaching or doing something kind of on the side. So I was making it up. That's like the short answer. Is that I was making it up.
So let's go back to like when you were an engineer. How did you like have this conversation with, I don't know, were you married at the time?
No.
Okay, so how did you have this conversation with your family about, I'm gonna leave my engineering job and pursue poetry?
I had been ruminating on this possibility for a while.
Okay.
I was an engineer, but I knew what I loved. Engineering helped fund a lot of the things that I loved, because I mean, you have a healthy paycheck.
Yeah.
You know, you can, you know, I self-published my first book. I was very fearless because I also was like, I'm going to my office.
Yeah.
But when I realized that it was time to go, was when I was taking more and more time off to go do poetry things. So I would be like, oh, I need a leave of absence for 2 months. I'm going to move to South Africa and go be in residency. And, you know, I'd come back each time and it'd be really difficult to restart the engine of facing my work. I knew I was going to do it. I also knew that in order to be able to do it, I didn't give myself enough time to think too deeply. I was just like, look, you have a certain amount of savings in the bank. You have the outline of a potential plan of action. I didn't really. And you're an adult. Like you're either going to like take charge of your life or not. So I didn't actually consult with many people, including my family.
Okay.
I did it first, and then I told them what I had done.
Right.
Of course, I'm saying this very confidently now.
Yeah.
I'm shaking and crying and doing all the things. But I also knew that if I had done it the other way around, I would have allowed myself to be talked out of it.
Right.
And I also onboarded them a little slowly. So I told my parents, you know, just 6 months, you know, it's just, you know, a little trial, something. Even though in the back of my mind, I'm like, I know this never ever back. You know, I told them it was a short-term thing. And also, I think for my parents, even though they were terrified for me, they had already seen certain things happen in my life that were pointing, like this thing, there was momentum, which they were interested, I think, even themselves to see where it would go. And also I had an engineering degree. So for them, it's like she takes a year off to...
She has something to fall back on.
She can go back to work. And then I just never went back to work. Yeah. So no, there was, I was single at the time. I was in my 20s. I didn't have even a boyfriend to consult with. Not that I would have, but I mean, there's no significant other in that way. And I think in retrospect now, I'm glad I did it then. I should have even done it sooner because, you know, I was unencumbered.
Of course.
That I'm, like, now I have
children
to get, like, there's all
life.
these things to consider. At the time, it was like, what's the worst that can happen?
Right.
I fail and go back to work. You know?
Right. Yeah, definitely. And something that you mentioned, it sounds like you really said, I'm going to try something and see where it goes, and there's no harm in trying.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if I go this way, I can pivot. If I go this way, I can still pivot. So you really, like, bet on yourself, really, to say, like, I trust the skills that I have, and wherever it takes me, I'm willing to go.
Yeah. And I think I'm still doing that constantly now. It's always just like, let's try.
Right.
Like, and I was saying earlier this year, like, I tell myself, do not be afraid to be seen trying. You know, it's okay. It's going to be embarrassing. It's maybe not going to work the first time, but it's like all of it is data. You keep just learning and growing. And so I've carried the same energy of trial and error. I think is like a driving force in my artistic life. Is just try it first.
Right. I actually like that. I like that a lot. Recently, like right before your open, when you went to Lagos, you had shared on Instagram something about you were about to go back to work. There's a point, I guess you must have been like well into this creative career, and you're like, I'm going to go back to work. And while I was watching it, I was like, oh my goodness, like I felt every emotion that you were sharing in that video. I was like, this is like beautiful. I want to talk about that. What happened that made you even say, okay, I'm just going to pack this up? It was like, nice try. I did it. I'm going to go back to work.
A number of things. And I feel like if you want to pursue artistic life in any way, you will come to this point probably several times. Right. So I had been trying to try for several years. Things had happened and then not happened. So I'd had a lot of big wins and bucket list items, but then they just never would push through to the other side. Right. I felt like even financially I was drained. I was like pulling a lot from my savings, but like not really earning enough to balance that out. I'd come from, like I said, an engineering career, not just a job. So that had a roadmap and a path forward. I was exhausted with having to figure out all the little pieces and just not seeing the rewards, like the fruits of it. And I just thought, like, maybe this is the end. Maybe this is time to just be a big girl and go back to work and keep quiet for the rest of your life. I was also disillusioned by like relationships and love, romantic love even. Like, if I'm being completely honest, it's like I had gotten my heart broken. So it just felt like my work wasn't working. My heart was broken. I was just like, I need to control some part of my life right now. And the easiest thing to control is that I can go get a job. So I had drafted this letter on the one end saying, "Dear Tony," my boss's name, "I've gone on this wild artistic journey. I'm ready." I was just like, all this stuff that I didn't mean. I just was like, I need to start earning a living. And then I wrote another email to my friend. And I feel like intuitively, I wanted her to talk me out of what I was about to do. So I sent her this message saying, you know, it was at the top of the new year. It was like, "Happy New Year. My life is in shambles. I'm going back to work." You know? And the reason I emailed her is I'd acted in a television series in Nigeria while I was there. It hadn't come out yet. And I didn't know how wildly successful it would be. So I was also on the verge of that happening. But we'd shot it. But you know when you shoot a thing?
You don't know.
So I was just telling her, look, I'll come back for all the like the promo run for the show. And then when that's done, I'm going back to work. Like, I'm you know, there's no more funds. And she was like, "Let me call you." She got on the phone. She didn't even email me back. She's like, "This is not an email issue."
Of course, no.
And she was like, "Look, I have this job." She was running like a media kind of company at the time. "I have this job for you. You can do. Just come home and like do that for a little while, and we'll figure out what to do next." And I look to that moment often as like really pivotal for me. Sometimes, particularly in friendships with women, with Black women, which is its own very specific brand of friendship. Their ability to see you clearly actually helps you see yourself. I think what my friend saw then was like what she saw the future of the thing. When I was at my lowest point, and her ability to reflect that to me and say, "It's not time yet. Maybe the time will come when it's time to work, but not now." Just a little bit longer. And I feel like being able to be seen in that way changed the course of my life. Shortly after that, the show came out. People loved it. And because people loved the show and my character on the show, they were like, "What else does this girl do?" Then my poetry took off. And I feel like that moment kind of like started to bend the tide in my favor. And if I had quit just a second sooner, I would have just gone back to work. And you know, I would have been at my desk when people were watching my show and telling me, I'd be like, "I'm in my office, like, what am I gonna do?"
And then it would have been harder for you. It would have been harder for you to like pivot back.
Yes.
Maybe. Who knows?
Who knows? And that's the thing. Who knows? And I would not have known. But I prefer this particular path. And I credit women like her along my journey, not just in that moment, but many moments throughout, who often be like, "You can do like this thing, you can do it," or "Have you called this person?" Making connections, like just helping me put the links together.
And I love that. I love that having like a network of people see, like you mentioned, like see you beyond what you can see in that moment. Because I think like obviously this creative life, you only see like so far, and obviously because there's so many things that you're doing, your hands are in so many things, you're just like, "Oh my goodness, like where is the break gonna come?"
And you often zoom in on the worst parts of everything that's happening. You know, so it's like you kind of need people to help you zoom out.
So being able to have someone that sees above is amazing. And like I think everyone needs those people that can see like just a few steps ahead of you and just help pull you along. Like, you know, it's gonna get better. Just let me help you, connect you in these different ways so that you can like take the breath that you need. Sounds like you got to take a breath that you needed.
I went to work, but
not the same type of work.
It was creative work still, which is, I was around creative people, and I feel like I was even like really deeply inspired in that time in a way that like kind of felt before. Still, so I'm really appreciative of that time.
As you've navigated through this creative career, what are some of like the failures, hurts that you've had to pivot through or that you've experienced?
Where do I begin? I feel like all of this work is turning failure in your favor.
Right.
Really, like all of this is moments of failing, starting over, failing, starting over, and using all of that data to fail better. You know, there's so many. I have attempted to do things that didn't work out. Like I said, I self-published my first collection of poetry, which in the literary world is not done. You know, like there's this stigma against self-publishing. But I didn't care. I was just like, I want to put my work into the world. So in some ways that was like a failure, but also one that still served me in the end. I think when there is no roadmap, you're often just throwing paint at the wall.
Right.
You know, like you're attempting things but with no idea what the outcome is going to be. I wish I had more mentorship in the beginning of my career. I would have been able to conserve my energy probably a little bit
of
more.
course.
Some things I probably wouldn't have done at all, or some things I would have done better. I mean, there's just too many to name. You know, doing events. Like I remember I mentioned my Rouge Poetry Years, this poetry night that I was running. The first few months, years of that event, it'd be like my sister, her husband, and some friends that I would beg to read. I would read 10 poems that night because there was no poets. Eventually, like we got to a point in that night where we had to turn people away at the door.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So, but that took many years. But if I had looked at that simply as just a failure and packed it up, it wouldn't have happened. So I guess there are many failures, but it's hard to single them out because they've all sort of helped build the next thing.
Right.
But almost anything I've done before in some version that didn't work.
Okay. I like that. And I'm hearing a lot of like tenacity coming out. And I think like that's speaking or preaching to me really, because just being willing to like stick with something even though it doesn't look like it's doing what you thought it would do, and not having to reinvent the wheel. Because you said like there's things that you've done before, right? But just knowing like the timing of when that would be appropriate, or now that you're further along, maybe now would be the time to, I don't know, try again and do that again. So I love that. Change gears a little bit because I know you are a mom. How has you pursuing this creative career, like I know your kids are still young, but how has it impacted, or how has it inspired you as a mom or as your kids, like just seeing you have a non-traditional job?
Yeah, I feel like my children are only just starting to understand.
Right.
My son and daughter saw me perform for the first time in August of last year.
Yeah.
You know, that was my daughter's first time seeing me on stage. My son, in the early, like when he was 4 or 5 months, had toured with me, but he has no memory of that, so he would be on my hip at rehearsals and things like that. But I think even now, like now is the time in which they're starting to understand that I do something other than take care of them, which I think is normal, whether you're an artist or a woman who goes into an office every day. Like your children do get to a point where they realize like you're made for more. I don't know that my career feels unconventional to them because they don't know what the boundaries of life are yet, which I think is a real privilege because they get to see me do this work. It is a very normal baseline for them. You know, like they don't, no one has told them that going to a 9 to 5 is the only way to be. But they have a father who does, and they have aunts and uncles who do, and they have a mother who doesn't. So I hope that this provides kind of a framework for them to work with where they feel like they can almost do any version of life. But yeah, I'm trying to
I think that
answered the question.
You did, and I think that's special because, well, like for me anyways, I didn't know an entrepreneur when I was like a child. Like I can't name one person until I got to be an adult that I looked around and saw other adults. But I think that's super special because now if your kids do choose, they have a landscape of other options, right? Just being able to have that autonomy to say, oh, look, there are other things that I could potentially do that doesn't have to be so rigid and traditional. And I think that is a beautiful privilege, really, for them to be able to see that and know that I can actually pick different things and not have to just do the one thing that socially is more acceptable, I guess. yeah, I think that is beautiful that they're able to see that and just have an opportunity to just experience that through you. As a poet or just being a creative, what has been challenging in that while being a mom? Like, so I know your schedule is probably sometimes like up and down. How has that been like difficult as a mom?
Yeah, I think I had the same issue that most mothers do.
Okay.
When they are in like the birthing and raising phase of motherhood, which I think is lifelong. But there were the years of like being pregnant,
right,
and not being able to like physically do the things, and
right,
then the recovery. And when I say years of being pregnant, I feel like you're pregnant for 2 years. Honestly, it feels like an eternity. But also like the months after, where you are physically and emotionally the source of life for
right,
a child. In those times, I found myself to be the most creative in my head.
Okay.
I had a lot of ideas, but I couldn't do them. So there's like the tension of like feeling inspired and full of things that you can't actually make happen because you're raising a child.
Right.
And by that I mean like your body's even in recovery.
Right.
So this is not a mind over matter thing. It's like you need to sit down and
right.
rest. Like
yeah.
you need to just chill. So there's been the challenge of that. Even after my children are more independent, it's balancing how much devotion I can show them as a mother and how much I need to give back to my work.
Right.
And that's constant. My children are 2 and 5 now, about to be 3 and 6. And I don't think that it comes to a complete end.
Right.
What I do become better at is understanding, paradoxically, that the more selfish I become, the more I can offer my children. By that I mean like the more I can pour into my own self,
right.
Beyond work, like taking care of myself, and doing the things that bring me joy. Then I become a version of myself to my kids that is more present, because I'm not resentful. I don't feel like I'm missing anything, you know. And I'm still learning that. I would say in the last year, I've only just started, like, I go to yoga every day now, like starting to do things for my body and move my body in ways it has not been moved in a very long time. And that hour of my day, I do not compromise it. Like I let the sky be falling first before you pull up my phone, you know, that kind of thing. And the more I do things like that, where I'm able to just carve out like this little piece of time for myself and for my work and for my body and my mind, then when I'm with my children, I'm with my children. Right. You know, again, I'm still learning. Yeah, of course. You know, still, each phase feels different. My children need me differently in each year of their lives. So maybe ask me again in a couple of years.
You said something, and it's something I've actually been thinking about. Just like you mentioned, like you go to yoga, you do something for you, because you want to be able to present your best self and be present like for your kids. And I've been thinking about like how that wasn't necessarily, well, I know for me, and I'm sure some other like of my peers, that wasn't modeled for us. Our parents, our moms particularly, didn't do that. It was like constant go, go, go. And I remember saying to someone, I remember like my mom would come home from work and then go and cook dinner in her work clothes, and then she would start dinner in her work clothes and then go change and then come downstairs and then finish, and then we would have dinner, and then me and my sister would do our homework, and then it'd be time to get ready to go to bed. And I'm like, I wonder if like the fact that there was no break in her day and I didn't actually see her do things for herself, if that made her more on edge. If that made her not be able to present herself in a way that showed us that she was all present and all here and being able to give us her full self, because she wasn't even able to give herself her full self, right? So I think it's beautiful that we're able to model it for our children, but I often wonder about that disconnect of not being able to see that modeled, and how much, maybe not difficult, but just how much more strange it feels like for us to be doing that when we haven't seen it done before. I will say, like, there's a privilege in being able to do that, right? So our mothers moved through the world in the ways that they did so that we can move through the world in the ways that we can, right? So because of the foundation and the setting up, we now have some breathing room in our lives where it doesn't feel like a constant hustle. But my mom raised 4 girls, you know, that they had moved from Nigeria to Canada to start over. So this space to, you know, go to yoga, like, it was just, conceptually, was just not going to happen. It's like she's trying to push 4 kids to school and all the things. So it feels like a really unique privilege
to be able to do that now, and also maybe to even turn back and encourage her to be able to do that now in these years of her life. So yes, it wasn't modeled, but I think I also understand why.
Of course, yeah.
You know, like I also get why. And our kids will also do things better than us.
Yeah.
And that's just how the cycle goes. I think, yeah.
And I think that's beautiful to even notice that like we're having an opportunity to see like that, I guess, full circle type of moment. Especially like for me, like I didn't grow up with my grandparents, right? So for me, it's literally me watching my mom and my dad and my husband's parents being given this opportunity to have that full circle moment. And then even how they interact with like our son, it's just like, wow, like this looks and feels just very different, and just enjoying that for them.
Yeah.
Because they didn't get that with us, right? So I love that. You mentioned when we talked about like your friend giving you this job opportunity, how important has community and sisterhood played a role in who you are today?
I'm the last of 4 girls, so I'm sistered up.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so I came out of that very feminine womanhood space, and so it's a framework from which I move through the world. I think being loved by women and cared for by women and shown community by women has like stiffened my spine. It's helped me kind of move through the world in a way that makes and women who are like solid, like incredible at what they do. Even speaking about my mom, in the last question you asked, like she was a career woman, so she's doing all this stuff and going to work. Like she did all the things as well. So having that as an example was a really beautiful thing. But I've also learned by the ways that I failed in sisterhood as well. I've learned by the ways in which friendships have broken down, in ways in which I didn't know how to show up for people and they didn't know how to show up for me. I think there's a constant push and pull between all the beautiful things that sisterhood has offered me, the wounds that sisterhood has offered me as well. Like I count all of those things as part of how I am in the world. It's funny, I'm working on a new album that is about sisterhood. It's called Sis, but it's also about all of the complicated things about sisterhood. And for me, that's an attempt to, like, we talk about romantic love a lot and like movies and all the things about like love and boy meets girl, whatever version of that that you like move through. But we don't really center friendships as worthy of celebration and being platformed. So I'm attempting through these conversations to talk about, because you think about friends that you've had before your career, before your husband, before your kids, before all the things, who have known you through time. And that feels like a really enduring love. Like that feels like a person who knows you from end to end. And so I'm curious about exploring that love as actually the most steadfast love in your life. Because it's been there the longest since the beginning. Not necessarily the longest, but it's been there through like many evolutions. And with this person, there's no marriage contracts. You don't have any children to bind you. You choose that person every single day, or don't. You know what I mean? So all of this to say that like you asked that question at an important time for me, because I'm really thinking about that question a lot. Like, how has sisterhood shaped me? And that involves looking at the bitter and the sweet. And like looking at the scale of that. And also thinking about like turning the mirror and thinking about how I have participated in the bitterness.
Of course. Yeah,
or
no,
the
definitely.
sweetness as well.
I think that's important, especially like we're having this conversation now, and like just as The Color Purple like just came out a month ago, and just for me, like I seen it when I was younger, but like revisiting it and like I'm like, okay, I'm gonna read that book, because this is a story of sisterhood. Like just how Black women have helped the survival, the triumph, the reconciliation of like another Black woman. And I'm just like, this is what that whole story is about. And I'm like, I need to reread this and like dive into just, I guess, the work of what Black women do and how we uphold each other in that way. And like you're saying, like it's really that enduring love in that platonic relationship, which I think is incredibly important. And like you mentioned, we don't talk about it enough or celebrate it enough. And I think that is definitely something that we should narrow in on and give it an opportunity to be celebrated.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so yeah, that was it for me. But thank you so much. Actually, no.
Is it another freestyle?
It's not a question. No, it's not another freestyle.
No more.
I wanted you to let us know where we can find you.
Okay.
How can we see your work, or where, like, if it's anywhere, and where can people find you?
I'm everywhere all at once. My name is Titilope. My handle on Instagram is @Titilope.
Okay.
It's where I'm most active. I'm like a 30+ woman, so TikTok and Snapchats. I'm still, please.
It's okay. Don't worry.
But I'm also on Twitter @DearTitilope. So you either anywhere you look for me, I'm either @Titilope or @DearTitilope.
Okay.
That's where I am.
On YouTube? Like, can we see?
Yes,
like,
I have a YouTube channel, Dear Titilope, or I think it's youtube.com/DearTitilope.
Right.
Or just search Titilope Shonuka, and all the things will come up. So there are videos of performances, there are probably interviews like this.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I am in the online world. But in the next few months, I have an album coming out that it will be another way to engage with.
Right.
I'm hoping to do another open show in Edmonton in the summertime. And so there will be opportunities to see me in the flesh as well. So just find me.
Yay. So you're going to have to come to Edmonton to see Titilope. Thank you so much for being with me and having this conversation. And thank you guys for watching Melanin Convos.